We've been hearing a lot lately about botnets and their use in mining. Basically, the idea is that if you compromise a number of machines, you can use the CPUs in order to do low-level mining of Bitcoin, but if you multiply that with enough machines, you could actually generate a small profit. We saw this where Rogue Employee distributed malware inside a game and used the GPUs to mine. And last week, I spoke to Panagiotis, a system administrator from Greece who discovered some malware and did some very interesting forensic analysis on it. So let's hear what he had to say. Recently, we've been talking about malware and the possibility of using botnets to mine for Bitcoin. Joining us today, we have someone who will talk to us a bit about malware mining. Hello.
Hello.
Do you want to tell us your name?
My name is Panagiotis Dimotikalis. Quite strange, I think. It's Greek.
Yes, indeed. So that makes two of us with unpronounceable names on the show simultaneously. It might cause problems with the internet, but let's see. Tell me a bit about how you first came across the mining malware that you discovered.
So as an IT consultant, I was asked a couple of weeks ago by a company to check some Windows workstations that were behaving strangely. They were not responding. They were slow, that kind of stuff. And first thing I did was to check for any rogue software that may be installed on the systems or just be present there. So it was quite obvious that the process called sys32.exe was running on the background, occupying 50% of the CPU cycles. Moreover, it had the child process called abab32.exe, who was trying to connect to the internet from time to time.
And how did you find this? Was it visible in the task manager? Or was it?
It was actually visible. I use a replacement for task manager. It's Mark Rusinovich Process Explorer. It's actually task manager on steroids.
Right. Okay, but it wasn't hiding. It wasn't stealthy. It was
No. Yeah. It used a little trick in trying to trick Task Manager especially, but not Process Explorer. And that was the reason why I actually found out the 50% CPU cycle it was consuming.
Okay, so you discovered these two processes.
Yeah. So I proceeded right away to kill both processes. I cleaned the registry entry that was created by them in order to start every time Windows boot. And finally deleted the executables. It was a pretty straightforward process, no complications. I mean, no file permissions problems or files being in use, that kind of stuff. Everything seemed to work okay. I had no complaints from the customer, so I considered the problem solved. But out of curiosity, I kept some samples just to mess with them later, run them on a VM, a virtual machine, just to dig, just in case I find anything interesting or maybe something that I may have overlooked.
Our audience thanks you for that curiosity.
Yeah. And I wasn't expecting to find that much. So the first thing I did was to check the two exes. And since I'm a net platform developer also, I found out that the first one, the sys32.exe, is written in C#. It's not packed nor protected in any way, so it can be disassembled pretty easily with any generic tool used for this kind of purpose.
By packed, you mean the binary itself was not compressed, so you were able to easily disassemble it?
Exactly. From the beginning, it was pretty clear that I was dealing with a process used to fire up a legitimate Bitcoin miner. The abab32.exe is actually a legitimate miner by a guy, I can't pronounce his name.
Jeff Garzik, yes. Jeff is one of the core developers. And he's developed a number of mining software. So this is Miner D, which is the CPU mining software by Jeff. So this is used by miners all around the world just to mine on their own computers, right? There's nothing weird about this.
The virus total detects Miner D.exe as malware. I mean, it has a detection rate of 10 out of 46 malware antivirus engines.
Oh, so they already classify that particular process as malware, which is interesting because it's a legitimate application, but it's found as malware often enough.
While I was scrolling through the disassembled code of sys32.exe, I was asking myself, I was looking just in case I found something interesting in there. And first thought that came to mind was, okay, you are mining Bitcoins. You are using other people's computers to mine Bitcoins. without their knowledge. So you probably want all this mining to go back to you in some way without human interaction. How do you do this?
Follow the money, yes.
Exactly. So I came across a particular function inside the disassembled code, which had the domain name, a port, a username under a miner, and the password for this miner.
No compression, no obfuscation, nothing. Just pure, right there in the code.
Exactly. Embedded in there. First thing I did was to check the domain name, which was not valid at the time I came across this malware. So just to mess with the guy, I registered the domain just in case he decides to come back to check his miners for any Bitcoins he has probably mined. So now the domain is under my registration. I have registered. So there's no way he can get those Bitcoins back.
So let me ask you, Panayotis, if after registering this domain, did you see any other malware activity directed to that domain? Were other instances of the software trying to connect back?
There wasn't any, but I used the server just for a couple of days just to check for this particular thing, any IPs that might connect to me, but there was nothing.
So they might be still in the wild, but not during the window that you checked.
Exactly. After registering the domain, just to make sure nothing will go wrong with this particular malware, first thing I did was fire up Google and search for this particular username that the miner was under. Right from the first page, there were 2 results dealing with Bitcoins and this particular username. The first one was in Bitcoin Talk, and the second one in Litecoin. 2 user profiles, actually.
So this led you directly to 2 user profiles in both of the main forums for Litecoin and Bitcoin. But you said this mining, was it mining Litecoin or Bitcoin? Could you tell?
I think it was by Bitcoin. I haven't checked it really. I'm not into Bitcoin. I just started reading about Bitcoin just for this particular reason.
Oh, okay. I see. Very, very interesting. So you're relatively new to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
For those of us who have been in this space a while, this seems strange because mining Bitcoin on a CPU is so unproductive. It would make a lot more sense to be mining Litecoin, but there you go. All right. So you found these 2 profiles. Then what?
Unfortunately, on Bitcoin Talk, this user had 0 posts, so no information in there. But on the other hand, I found out about you, so it was okay. It was great information still. On Litecoin, there was a single post under this username. It was in a subforum called the Project Development. It was written on the 30th of April, past April, and 4 days later it was edited in a pretty suspicious way. The whole post was replaced with dashes and dots. So the only thing I can make up from this is that someone who had the project under development that he didn't want anyone to know after its completion or something like that.
Ah, interesting. Or they changed their mind and went back and tried to make the post disappear, essentially.
After this, I got back to the password used the miner, which was strangely familiar. The password was Iparcho22, which in Greek means I exist 22. And it was written in Greeklish, which Greeklish is actually Greek words written using the Latin alphabet. So it was another clue that the guy is probably Greek.
So you've got a password that points to a username that seems to be Greek, that points to a specific user with a password that itself indicates at least a basic knowledge of the Greek language. So, okay, the plot thickens.
Yeah. And so next thing I had to do was to optimize the query, in Google, the query about the username of the guy. And actually ask Google to give me results originating from Greek domains only. I mean, I used his username and I told Google to give me results from originating from Greek domains only. I got everything you can possibly imagine. His name, cell phone number, email address, Skype, occupation, city he's living in, an estimated address, photograph, and the irony, an ad he had put on a forum selling, amongst other things, a USB drive.
Very interesting.
It was actually the first mean of that was how the company was infected in the first place.
Okay, so elaborate a bit on that. You're saying that he was selling a USB drive, and within this, you say that the company where you found the infection was infected by USB drive?
Yeah, exactly. No one from the company bought this particular USB drive. Just, the irony of this ad.
Okay, but the malware was distributed by USB.
USB drive, yeah.
So at the moment, we have no way of knowing whether this was an accidental transmission towards where it was infected, or if this was more broadly distributed, or whether it's still running somewhere on other systems. Is that correct?
Exactly. Unfortunately, since the domain is not online anymore, he's not controlling the domain, probably he has stopped, he maybe updated the malware. No idea, I can tell.
In the meantime, we here at Let's Talk Bitcoin have reached out to this person or to various contact addresses that we think are related to this person. We've requested an interview. So let's see how that goes. Tell me a bit about how you came across Bitcoin. You said when you discovered the malware, you didn't know much about Bitcoin. That's a really interesting story.
I have read everything about Bitcoin. I knew what was going on, but I have never mined for Bitcoins or deal with the technical details of the Bitcoin.
So you were familiar or you're aware of Bitcoin, but you hadn't been involved personally, and then suddenly you discover this malware?
Yep, right.
Very nice. Do you actually own Bitcoin? Are you involved in Bitcoin at the moment?
Right now, I just have a wallet.
Oh, very good. Excellent. So what we're going to do is we're going to attach one of your addresses for donations on the site, perhaps, or something like that.
Okay,
get you started. What else did you discover as part of your research? So what would you say was your end goal here?
I just hate guys who try to manipulate people with not that much of knowledge in computers. I hate malware. I think they're actually thieves on the internet.
So your personal sense of justice was offended, and you needed to see more, and also your sense of curiosity for...
Exactly, yeah.
What kind of advice would you give people who come across perhaps some weird symptoms on their systems? Well, what should they be looking out for? How do you identify this type of mining malware?
Figure out that something was wrong. It was pretty straightforward that their computers were slow at any time. It was stuck consuming 50% CPU cycles at all times. So even for people who just use their computers to log into Facebook, I think they will understand that something is sluggish or something is not right. First thing they have to do is fire up a task manager, or even better, Process Explorer. I'm always talking for Windows systems.
This does sound like a Windows problem, that's for sure. So you mentioned there was a slight difference between Task Manager, and, which is provided by Windows to clarify. And Process Explorer is a third-party tool that's a bit more sophisticated. So what was this malware doing with Task Manager to obfuscate?
There was a particular function that was trying to trick Task Manager, and it was always watching for task ngr.exe. I think it's the executable of Task Manager. I can't remember the name. And every time it saw that Task Manager was running, it immediately idled its execution. When you fired up Task Manager, you could see that it was consuming 0 CPU cycles.
That's really smart. So basically it was playing dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Anytime it's looking this way, play dead. So as soon as you open Task Manager, the malware plays dead, then you close Task Manager and it goes back to using 100% of CPU.
50%.
Or 50% of CPU. Was that because of it was on a multi-core, or was it limited to 50%?
It actually checks how many cores are on the system and decides every time to use half of them with 50% of each one.
Okay, so it's nice. It wants you to still be able to use Windows.
Right.
Which is typical behavior. Biologically, a parasitic organization tries to not kill its host, because if it kills its host, it dies also. So it kind of makes sense to keep the infection at a minimum.
Maybe in the next version of the malware, I don't know, an update maybe, he could use the GPU. Not the CPU. As you said in the beginning, that there is no point of using the CPU.
Yes, and who knows, perhaps this was simply a test. Perhaps this was simply version 1, the beta, From the experience of this on how to propagate and run the software, the next one's going to be, CG miner or BFG miner, one of the more sophisticated GPU miners. How would you tell if your GPU was being used?
Actually, Process Explorer has a monitoring tool for this also.
So one of the main bits of advice here is don't necessarily trust Task Manager. Use a third-party process monitoring system like Process Explorer.
It's a freeware and everyone can download it.
Has this made you more interested in Bitcoin, or are you a bit annoyed by Bitcoin out of this experience? Or has it changed your mind at all?
No, it hasn't changed my mind. But the only problem is that my hardware is quite old. I have only one GPU, a quite old CPU, and I'm out of luck regarding Bitcoin mining.
Unless you use somebody else's computers en masse, which is obviously, perhaps that's part of the incentive structure here. Part of the problem is because mining on a single CPU isn't really doing anything. You need thousands of systems to make any serious amount of money. So maybe that's the incentive that drove this person to create this software.
That's my guess.
Yotis, thank you so much for giving us this information and for the excellent analysis you have done. We're going to stay on this story and follow up. Thank you for giving us a glimpse into the world of malware mining for Bitcoin.
Thank you very much, Andreas.
So pretty fascinating stuff we heard from Panagiotis there. After that interview, I reached out to the person supposedly distributing this malware based on the information I found on the forums and sought to conduct an interview. Those requests are still going out, and I still have hope that he will be talking to us on the show at some point. But as of now, we have no comment, and so we'll have to, unfortunately, leave it at that. So what do you guys think about the idea of people distributing CPU miners inside malware?
Because it took so long, because it seems like this was something that was dead by the time it was found, I wonder if this wasn't being used at a time where CPU mining was still viable. Because CPU mining has, over the last 2 years, become kind of obsoleted, but we don't really know when these systems were infected or when this person was really active in the space.
That's a really good point. This could be malware that's been sitting there for a couple of years and was only discovered recently. It would be interesting to look at which particular version of the Miner D mining software was in there. That would give us an earliest date possible.
I was thinking the exact same thing about, how long had this been sitting there until it was discovered? And I was also thinking, as sort of an accompaniment to that, how common is this? How many companies have computers that are just sitting there mining Bitcoins and nobody has any idea? And, maybe it's not such a huge deal anymore because CPU mining, as you said, Adam, is kind of obsolete. But I'm curious, if you just took a random sample of a couple thousand computers at just different companies and maybe schools and things like that, how many of them would be running Bitcoin mining malware?
So the answer in general is it's estimated that between 4 and 8% of systems running Windows in commercial environments have been compromised. That means they're running some kind of rootkit, Trojan, or malware system permanently.
That's it? 4 to 8%?
4 to 8% is it's an enormous number for several 10 million computers out there. Keep in mind that most of the time, monetizing the processing power and memory of these systems is not easy. So in most cases, they're rented out, and they're rented out to people who can generate money with these botnets. And usually that involves spam. And so if you have an average click-through rate on spam that's in the, 0.000% click-through rate, and you're able to make a few sales, it's not a very lucrative monetization scheme. I can see that mining, whether Bitcoin mining on GPUs or perhaps Litecoin mining as well, would be a much fast path to monetization. And if you take that for granted and there are tens of millions of machines out there, it makes sense. It's only a matter of time before those who've compromised them figure out there's a better way to make money.
Of that 4 to 8% of computers out there that are compromised, definitely most of them are not going to be mining Bitcoin.
Right now, probably none or very few of them. Most of them are probably running spamming malware, which is the most common monetization scheme. But the nice thing is that many of these malware systems are upgradable, so they will just upload a new payload and a new set of task directives to the compromised systems. They're all remote controlled. It wouldn't be surprising to start seeing some of these being converted to malware miners.
Is this even evil? I mean, most of the time when you talk about malware, it's being used for purposes like you said, like spam. That's the monetization that's available because you're not able to actually monetize the CPU itself, because you're not able to monetize the hardware itself. Instead, you just use it as another arm, on the multi-armed octopus, so to speak, throwing, spam out into the system. With Bitcoin, again, you're talking about computers that are basically drone computers. And in this situation, they were noticed eventually as being slightly sluggish. But when you interviewed the gentleman before, he said that, that the miner intentionally was only taking 50% of the CPU. So with that in mind, for basic office tasks, that might not even be noticeable under a lot of circumstances. So does it matter?
I think that's the goal, really. It's kind of the biology of a parasite is to protect the host, because if the host dies, the parasite dies too. So keeping your mining under 50% so that the host doesn't notice is kind of a sensible precaution. But think of it from a different perspective. If you're a business and you have 10,000 computers, you have 40 or 50 of these machines compromised with a miner, and they're running 24/7 for a year consuming electricity, I would say that's theft. Absolutely. I'm paying for that electricity. I would say that's theft. Now, evil, that's really a completely other issue. I reserve words evil for people who institute torture regimes, for example, not for people who steal a bit of electricity. But then again, in today's society, we call those people vice president. We call these people hackers.
This seemed like it was pretty restricted to kind of a Greek ecosystem. When I was listening to the interview, it seemed to me almost like this could have been like a trial run or a test, that somebody could have just gone to kind of a local place. I know that, Greece is not small, but comparably speaking, you could just go in and infect a couple of companies like this if you had some sort of access either through a job or working with the companies in other ways.
Yeah, he's an IT guy, and that makes it more evil, right?
Right.
It seems that the perpetrator here has an IT career. If that's true, then obviously they're exploiting their professional position in a way their clients obviously don't know they are.
Right. So then it really becomes, again, if it's something that's not super noticeable, yeah, you're right, it's still theft, but you can see how the proportion of people who might be interested in this and who might have overlap with the opportunity with it, really, it's almost a no-risk scenario for them. The chances of being caught are small, and the chances of it being understood if you are caught are even smaller.
Well, I could tell you, this guy was caught and nothing's going to happen.
Right, exactly.
It's the proof is right here. And it's not just because this is Greece and, who knows how to even start proceedings like this in Greece. I don't think it would have been much different story if this was happening here.
Right. It just seems like there isn't much actionable that can be done. Sure, there might be small breaches of the law that have actually occurred, and you could certainly try and, make one of those work to accomplish your larger goals. But as far as the actual act itself being illegal, besides the fact that it's tampering with someone else's computer and installing unauthorized software, there just isn't much here.
No, but what I'm interested about is the incentive structure, because if you assume that this incentive structure exists, that cryptocurrencies will become the dominant form of monetization on botnet mining, that in turn will create a more profitable botnet mining scheme, which will lead to spreading more Trojans and malware in order to compromise more systems. So the bad news here is that this takes an existing war of malware and escalates it by funding the adversary, essentially, with large amounts of money coming from cryptocurrency mining. It makes monetization simple, just like it makes monetization simple for us selling content or for building an e-commerce site. It also empowers hackers to make monetization of stolen machines simple, and that means it's going to happen again and again and more until pretty much you can assume that every relative you know who's not computer savvy is running a Bitcoin miner. Grandma's mining!
She doesn't even know it.
She doesn't even know it.
You're listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin, the premier audiocast providing news and insights that cover the rapidly evolving world of digital money. Our twice-weekly shows include analysis of late-breaking news, updates on key technical, business, and regulatory issues, and in-depth interviews with the key people driving the new digital economy. Let's Talk Bitcoin offers sponsors an attractive way to reach a targeted and savvy audience. For more information, email sponsors@letstalkbitcoin.com.
EasyDNS is the Swiss Army knife for your domain names, helping meet their customers' individual needs since 1998. EasyDNS has been an outspoken critic of SOPA and CISPA. EasyDNS was an early supporter of Bitcoin, and now they are proud to sponsor this show. Do business with a company that shares your values. Get a 13% discount when you pay with Bitcoin. Go to bitcoin.easydns.com and be sure to use discount code LTB.